Today we are going to look at the lecture what a database is. Simply, we will start with the basics of database. Now, database can be simply defined as a collection of related data. It can be defined as a collection of related data. Now, what do I mean by the word related data? So, this word related data means the type of data that has some kind of a connection with each other. Like, for example, if we look at a database for the university. So, for the university database, we can have the data about the student, the teacher, the course taught in the university, etc. It is simply a collection of related data. Now, uh, what the RDBMS is, Relational Database Management System. It is simply a collection of tables. And to make it simpler, I can say collection of related tables. So we can look at it as a collection of related tables. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean to say by this that it is a collection of tables that are of data which is related to each other. Like, for example, I gave you an example of the university. It has the student, the teacher, and the course data about all of these. Now, if we look at it in the way of a relational database, if we want to store it in a relational database management system, how will you store it? We will store it in tables. So, for example, we have this student uh, table, and for example, we have this teacher table. So we'll have two different tables, and all of this will come under a single database. There will be a university database, and this database will have tables. This is what I mean to say here, a set of or a collection of related tables. Now this university database, it will have a set of tables. Let's suppose we only look at two tables, student and teacher. Now, this student word here, this student word, it is known as an entity. We call this an entity, and what an entity is? An entity can be simply known as an entity. It can be simply known as a so simply we can say an entity. It is simply a thing in real world. It is a thing in the real world, and we will look at it as an example, like it is a person, place, or let's suppose a concept. And this will have the properties like it can be uniquely identifiable. We can identify an entity uniquely. It has a unique existence and a unique identification, and it has an independent existence. So this is what an entity is. An entity can be seen as a thing in real world. It can be a person, like a student, a teacher, a place, like for example a city, or a concept like a course can be seen as a concept, and this is uniquely identifiable. You can uniquely identify a course, and it has independent existence. So there is an independent existence of a student, a teacher, or a course. So This is what an entity is. Now let's suppose we have this student entity here. I told you database is a collection of tables. Now this student entity, it will have the rows and the columns. Now the first column that it will have, it will be the attributes of the entity type. This student, it is a table, and it is known as an entity, and it is a part of a database, and it has the attributes like will have the unique identification number. It will have, the student will have a name, and for example the student, it will have a class. Let's suppose it has only these three attributes, for example, right now. And now moving on, for example, we have the teacher. The teacher will also be a table, and it will be having, for example, the columns which will be of the name. Let's suppose the teacher ID, the identification of the teacher, and for example the name of the teacher. Let's suppose these are only these two attributes. Now we will simply give some data to this. Let's suppose 123 is the data, and name, for example, ABC, and class, for example, 610. So we have the following here. And now for the teacher ID, we can have the name and the teacher ID. Let's suppose 456 is the teacher ID, and the name is DEF. Now moving on, I told you that a database is a collection of related data, and relational database is a collection of related tables. So tables which are in some way have a connection with each other. So a teacher, he teaches a student. That's why it comes under a single database, the university database. Now these are DBMS. It is made up of tables, and these tables are known as relations. These tables will be known as relations in the relational database. Like this teacher, it is a relation, or student, it is a relation. So these tables, they are known as relations, and these are known as the attributes. The teacher ID, name, class, they are known as the attributes. So what are the attributes? The attributes, you can simply call the attributes as the columns, or those that simply represent a characteristic of the entity. This simply represent a characteristic of the entity, and these entities, they are a part of the database, and these entities are the name of the relations or the tables, and each of the tables, they have attributes that represent a characteristic of the entity, and then we can fill in the rows, or we can fill in the records, and each of this record, this will be called a tuple. Each of this record, it is called a tuple. Each of the record, it is called a tuple. So what is simply a tuple? A tuple can be simply known as a record or a row in the table. A record or a row in the table. So it can be simply known as a single record or a single row in the table. So this is the basics of RDBMS. The database, it is a collection of related data, and RDBMS relational database, it is a collection of related tables. So for example, if we have a database for the university, there will be only one database for the university, and it will be divided into tables. And these tables have the names which represent an entity, and this entity has attributes which are the columns of the table, and then there are records of the table, and each of the records, they represent a real world value. Like for example, a student, he has UID, name and class. It one record represents a one student in the university. So how this is how the data is stored in the database, and these are the technical terms for this. A relation, which is a table; attribute, the characteristic of the entity, a thing in the real world, which is the name of the table; and then we have the tuple, which is a single record or a single row in the table. Now, for example, if we want a snapshot of the data, we, for example, want the data of the database at one point. If, for example, we take the data, or we take the snapshot of the data in the database at, for example, a time 10:30 a.m. At a time 10:30 a.m., if we take a snapshot of the data, or if we look at the data in the database, that will be known as the instance. What is the instance? Instance is simply the snapshot of the data at a basic, or at a specific amount of time, or at a specific point of time. So what is an instance? It is a snapshot of the data at a specific point of time. Or simply you can tell, or you can see it as the current data in the database. So this instance, it is known as a snapshot of the data at a specific point of time, and it can be changing. Like for example, if at 11 a.m. we add another student here, we add a student named 895 with UID 895 and with name RWS, and for example class 613. So we add this at 11 a.m. So at 11 a.m. the instance of the data will be changed. There will be one more student in the data. So this will be the instance of the data at 11 a.m. This is what the instance is. So all of these represent the technical terms in a database. And database, it can be seen as a collection of related data. There, for example, for the university database, there is only one database, and it is a collection of tables. I hope you understood the basics or the introduction to the database. Thank you.